You have entered into the black hole of real estate, a place for industry news, tips, and strategies. Once you enter into our vortex, even if you could leave, you're probably going to want to stick around. I'm your host, Ron Weiss-Sikarski, and you are now entering the black hole of real estate.
So it is great to be back, and we are looking at the second half of this year as a building block to the future. And what does it hold for home prices? We're going to talk about that today because we've had such a giant increase in the last 12 months. A big piece of the puzzle of affordability for first-time home buyers and move-up buyers is the FHA program. And there's something for those who've recently graduated that also is coming into play, which might help out. And then at the end, I want to talk about the best cities for relocating in the United States. And you better just think about what three cities in what one state hit the top six. I'll leave that for the end. But the first thing I want to talk about right now is, we've seen unprecedented increase in home values. And, if we look back, we've seen the highest rate up about 13% year over year. So if you go back 15 years, 2005, you'd have to go all that way back to see this 13% gain we've seen over the last year. Now, that was the pre-boom days, or in the middle of it, where the bust came in 2000, and let's call it 6, 7, and 8. The stock market definitely crashed in 2008, and home values were wavering during those times. And we went into an abyss for 5 years or so where it was really hard to get the real estate industry moving again. Now, what's different this time is the usual things we would talk about. Median home sales prices in Florida, in particular our area, they're hovering around 300,000. With the number of relocation buyers coming to the area, what you have to keep in mind is they're not purchasing with no money down or these invented loans where you work in a fast food place getting a $500,000 house. These are people coming from high cost states where maybe the median sales price is $400,000 or $500,000. So when they see a home at 300 in this market and they stretch to 305, it's a bargain to them because they're paying 100 less than the market that they just came from, or 200 less. That extra five doesn't mean too much, especially if their destination is such that they're going to be there for the next 10, 20, whatever years of retirement. With that in mind, that little bit doesn't make as much of a difference to them as somebody moving across town, as long as people continue to come to the state. And there's a lot of sentiment that a good portion of the country like the governor in Florida, and they like the fact that there's no state income tax, and the weather, well, that's a bonus too. So just those three things alone would cause people to move this way. But there's really strong evidence that this 15-year high might just continue. And with that in mind, what makes a good market right now? Well, it's relative affordability. Most people coming to the area can afford the properties that they're buying. There are some people, and this is any market, where they're maxed out on what they can purchase. And even if they wanted to move, home prices are such that they could sell their house, but they may have a difficult time qualifying for the next house. That's every market. It's not just this one. It's not a unique thing. But right now, again, there's just not much that we see that's going to slow this market down. But thought it was interesting. It's a 15-year high, and it's a Case-Shiller Index report that I had noticed online. And Florida Realtors put that one out. So just to reference that piece, it's not a fiction piece, it's a real piece. And it's interesting that it appears that it's going to continue to play out. Now, Fannie Mae also chimed in on this, and it's kind of funny. They meaningfully downgrade 2021 home sales. Well, they had predicted earlier this year that you might see an increase in home sales of 6.3%. So the meaningful downgrade is they think is more in the fours, maybe 4.5%, is an uptick in overall home sales. So, among the misleading, headlines, let's make some news over here. Home sales are meaningfully downgraded. Okay, so they were going up 6% in your projection, and now they're going up 4% in your projection. Most of that came at a time when we had a severe shortage of materials and lumber. Some of that is subsiding right now. Fuel prices, and there's a number of things that are being hit with inflation right now, including home prices. But supply chain is correcting itself, and we've seen already a giant retrace in the cost of lumber just in the last 30, 45 days. So that was probably more of an anomaly in a supply chain thing versus an affordability thing. So even though there was a meaningful downgrade, they're still projecting, 4% up. Hey, maybe we'll split the difference and call it 5% increase. But I think that's the direction that things are going to be heading. No. With regard to affordability, FHA is going to make it a little bit easier for student loan buyers to get a mortgage. So what does that mean? If you've got a really big student loan and you just went to college and either graduated or almost graduated, um, the government wants to step in and remove some of the barriers and provide more access. One of the ways that was hurting a buyer with a lot of student loans was the fact that if they didn't have a payment ongoing, or was in some sort of forbearance, or just was not calculated, they were taking 1% of the overall loan size and applying that, which could be, if you have 100,000 student loans, that could be applying $1,000 a month, where with low interest rates that are prevalent right now, the actual payment might have been far less than $1,000 per month. So the 1% rule has been enforced for years and years, and it's gotten in the way just a little bit for some of the first-time home buyers or those using FHA because of the low down payment. And let's not confuse first-time home buyers and FHA. It's just an FHA loan that a lot of first-time buyers just happen to use, mainly because the down payment is 3.5%, and the interest rate is typically favorable, and it'll relax a few things on the credit side, perhaps. But right now, they are going to use the actual student loan payment for the calculation for what they call your debt to income ratio. And that should be a positive for most, if not all, buyers in that category. So if you have a student loan and perhaps people say they get turned down for a loan, that's not necessarily the thing. They may not qualify for the home that they want. So in essence, let's say they were looking at a $300,000 home and they didn't qualify to spend $300,000 on a home. They may have been turned down for 300, but they would have been approvable, if you will, for a lower number, maybe 250 or 200 or some number like that. So it's not always that you're flat out denied. You may not just be able to spend as much as you had imagined in the beginning. So the change of student loan is certainly one way to play that. I mean, the other thing, let's just talk about the obvious. If you're thinking of buying a car and thinking of buying a house, that $600 car payment that you just bought is going to greatly affect your purchasing power. So I would suggest that if you're going to buy a house and a car, invest in the house first. You're more than likely to get the car afterwards because they use different qualifying metrics for that. So if you're trying to game the system, the way to do that is to purchase the home, the place you're going to live. The car is a depreciating asset, and it's certainly transportation, but you know, having a home for many people is more important than the car. So give that some thought as far as affordability. There are ways to combat the rising cost of home ownership. A few episodes back, we talked about a study that we did, and to be brief about it, I would just say that if the median sales price last year was, let's say, 250 in your market, and the interest rate was 4%, and then you fast forward to this year, and maybe the median sales price went up, 10 or so percent to 275, but the interest rate dropped to 3, your monthly payment is actually quite a bit cheaper. And the numbers we looked at is over the life of the loan, you'd save $15,000, maybe $15,000 to $20,000 over the life of the loan, even though the price was higher. With the interest rate so low, it actually costs you less money overall. Just do your 30 years with the payments times your mortgage payment and compare the two and find the savings. So interestingly enough, the price went up, but the actual cost to the consumer went down. I think that's pretty remarkable. So, there's one other thing that we should talk about. Why do we believe, what do I believe, that the home values in Florida are somewhat resistant to what may or may not happen in the market? And yes, there's all this buyer fatigue thing going around, and buyers are exhausted. They're standing up, and they're not going to keep paying these prices. Well, maybe in your market, but the study that's out is showing, and this is over the last several years, where are Americans relocating to? And there are 3 Florida cities in the top 6. So I guess it's not a shock that I'm talking about something in Florida. The market that I'm in along the coast, Daytona Beach and Cocoa Beach, those are popular beach areas. But just to the north, Jacksonville came in at number 3 nationwide. And Tampa, just on the other coast, a couple hours away, came in at number 5. And Orlando, just barely an hour away from here, came in at number 6. And if you want to look at the top 30, Miami also made the top 30. So, interestingly enough, Jacksonville, Tampa, and Orlando all right in this region. Um, three in the top six, and I think that's pretty impressive. Believe it or not, they stated warmer climates is one of the reasons. No state taxes, one of the reasons. Um, it is showing that those areas are appreciating, because those are metropolitan areas, a little bit faster, more business, more industry. But some of the outskirts around there, that's a short commute, 30, 40 minutes. There are some value priced homes in that area that would be a little bit less in those metro areas. All in all, what we're finding is, believe it or not, Florida is still hot, and there are some projections that Florida will continue to gain to become one of the most populated states in the country. I imagine Texas would fall into that. And we see sharp declines in places like New York and even California right now. So there is definitely a shift in population, and we'll see how that plays out over time in any number of other things. I'm sure somebody out there is already thinking about the midterm elections for next year, so we'll see what that shift does. Um, I haven't witnessed that a change in a party or a government or a president's really affected home sales or real estate sales. I do believe that people, you know, they're designed upon wanting to move, and that what causes the buying and the selling of houses. It's the need to move. And I still haven't seen where the government really has posed, cause for concern that caused a lot of people to start moving or stop moving. But we'll see. Well, there you have it. So the top cities are all in Florida, at least three out of the six to move to. And this is a nationwide study over the last few years. By the way, if you were wondering who came in number one, it was Las Vegas. So we'll see how it plays out. But right now, pretty good stuff. Well, that's what we have for you this week. So if you're thinking of making a purchase and you're going to be a FHA buyer, good news for you. Good news on the horizon if you're thinking of selling the property. And overall, the real estate industry is alive and well and healthy, especially in Florida. So that's what I have for you this week. This is Ron Wysakarski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.